Okay. It's working. Hello, and welcome to Practicalli. My name is John Stevenson. Thank you very much for joining me today. And hope everybody is nice and safe and healthy, especially with the things happening in the world today. So today we're going to cover some web scraping. And so web scraping it's a bit of a blunt tool. It's kind of a last resort if there's no API for you to be able to use. And we're going to pick a fairly commonly known about website called Hacker News. And we're going to do a bit of scraping on that just as an example. There is an API for that website, but it's a useful website to be able to explore and understand how to do some basic web scraping. Again, this is just an introduction, but it should help you understand how to use the tools. So let's see. Let's switch to that's working. Oh yes, that's working. Cool. So as usual, all the information you can find on the Practicalli website. So videos and screencasts, the books I'm working on. I've done some updates on the SpaceMax book recently. I need to do some other work on the other books as well. If you need to get in touch with me, then it's the Practicalli channel on the Clojure in Slack, or you can send me a direct message as well. And you can support me in various ways as well to keep me motivated and keep me doing these weekly videos. So the content we're going to cover today is in the blog, and so if you go to web scraping with Clojure, I'm going to do an overview blog about the different various scraping tools. There's quite a lot of different ways to scrape in Clojure. So there's Enlive, which we're going to look at today, and then there's also where is it? We've got Hickory. Wherever it is, there's something called Hickory. It seems to be quite popular as well. And there's Sparkle Driver, which is quite nice because it also does JavaScript content as well. And although there is some limitations on that as well. And so there's lots of different kind of things. Skyscraper sounds quite interesting. It's quite like a framework for building your own thing for doing large amounts of scraping. So if you've got some legacy websites you need to deal with at work and there's no APIs and you need to go through all of them, then Skyscraper looks quite promising too. And there's just there's lots of other little ones as well. It's fairly easy to write your own, but there's there is some mileage in understanding which are the ones to actually use. So I'll do a little article on that as well. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're going to do. So I'm going to do something practical, because this is Practicalli. And so we're going to walk through how to scrape Hacker News. So I created a project. I did this a while ago, actually. Created a project. Where did I put that? No. Oh. Projects, Clojure, web scraping projects. So I just created a project called Web Scraper Enlive, which is a very simple project, just a deps.edn project. And so we've got just this Web Scraper Enlive thing, and I'm going to do some other examples of web scraping as well as I find them. I haven't written any tests for this yet, but I shall do that, I guess, in the near future. And so I just created this with Clojure command line, so Clojure new app, and Practicalli web scraper. So I'm just using the CLJ new add-on to Clojure CLI, and that creates me a nice simple project. And then the only thing I really need to do for web scraping using Enlive is just to add Enlive as a dependency. So if we go, this is my deps.edn file, and so all I've just done is I've changed the formatting a little bit because I find this a bit easier to read and to work with. And so I've just added in the deps along with Clojure. I've just added Enlive, and this is 1.1.6, which is the latest version. think it's been around. I don't think it's changed much for a while, but Clojure is always very backwards compatible, so you don't really need to concern yourself if a library is or seems inactive. It just means it might be complete. If it does everything you need to do, then it doesn't really need any more additions. So yeah, there's some minor updates recently, but most of this was done like 5 years ago. But it's a very solid library, so it's very easy to use. And the web hasn't really changed that much. The only thing, I guess, the tricky bit is if you do come across JavaScript-driven websites like Practicalli. So if we go to the Practicalli website, and if we go and inspect this, then you can see, well, a lot of it is just JavaScript. And if you go to a website like this is just kind of JavaScript. So this is a bit trickier to go in and scrape. Although you should be able to still find the tags and so on. But sometimes if you've got, well, this particular thing, if we inspect the element here and open this up a little bit, you can see it's just got spans that are like regularly updating because of JavaScript. So it can make it more tricky to actually scrape websites like these. But there's the Sparkle driver that's supposed to be quite good for that kind of thing as well. Let's kill that for now. Oops. Boom. So we're going to also look at the how to use the inspector in the browser to help us find the content that we're looking for. So what did we do here? Oh, hello, Paddy. And so then we've got, yes, so we've created a project, and now we just go into the source code. So there we go. So all I've done is just I've added a require statement here just to include the dependency into this namespace. And oops, what did I do there? Oops, I haven't broken anything. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so I've just included this as for the dependency, and I just included it using an alias of HTML. So wherever you see HTML is Enlive functions we're calling. And we've just set up a def just to have the hacker news URL just bound to a URL. I guess I didn't really need to do that, but it's just convenience. If you've got, you could have like a generic URL or a set of URLs that you're testing and put that into a def statement, and then you can just select from those as well. Then, so you could just do slurping if you just wanted to get the web content. So I've got that installed, yeah. So I've already got the REPL running, and I've evaluated most of this stuff. If I just slurped it, slurp just goes off and actually just gets the raw HTML as a string. But if you do that, then it's you kind of have to do a lot of string processing, which even in the best language in the world, it's still it's tricky. Even if you're using Perl, it's still a bit funny, and you have to use a lot of usually end up using a lot of regex, regular expressions, and it gets quite frustrating. So we can do better than that. I'm sure you'll be pleased to know. And so we can use Enlive, and we can go off and grab some content. So Enlive uses this HTML resource function, which takes a kind of HTML object, which is actually a java.net.url object. There we go. And so we are doing a bit of Java interop, as it were, but it's only a tiny amount, and you wouldn't even notice it. So we actually just include this java.net.url, and when we put a full stop after it, then it creates an object of that type. So it's a bit like doing, well, it is the same as doing new for a java.net.url object. So that's how complex our Java interop is, i.e. not very complex at all. So we're just passing the string of the URL into this to create this. When we're creating this java.net.url, so if you go java net URL, it's there. Small wee. So this is just this is just from Java, and it just creates an object, and then so this is the constructor, which takes a string. So we're just passing a string to the constructor, and it's going to create as a URL object, a HTML object, and that's what Enlive is based on. That's what the HTML resource is looking for. And so this basically creates this object, and then HTML resource converts it into a Clojure data structure. So it's a bit like a simplified version of the document object model. And so here we get something like this kind of output, except we get lots of this. This is why I'm showing it in the blog post, because there's a huge amount of this. Even for a simple page like Hacker News, there's an awful lot of tags there. And so this is just kind of, I guess even with Enlive, you still got this challenge of figuring out where the content is and how to get it, and how it can be uniquely identified. So if you look at the results from HTML resource, and then you can go through that and find the tags that you want, or find the content you want, and then find out which tags it's surrounded by. So we'd kind of want to have the we've got this title class, which is on the TD, which is like a table cell, a table data, and it's got a content tag in there that is the title of the article, or a title of one of the articles in Hacker News. And this was from when I was doing this yesterday. There was I think it might still be in there. Depends if it was voted for. And so you've still got to try and figure out where the content is, and how to actually uniquely find it, because Enlive is going to use these tags to find it. So we need to know what tags to actually give Enlive to actually narrow our results down. So one way to do that is to actually look through all of the content, which is probably not the most efficient way to do things unless you know what it's doing already. So it's actually much easier to go onto the website itself, and then just go in, and if we go in, right click and inspect, then we can see that's quite small. Let's make that a bit bigger. There we go. What's my face? Let's hide my face for a minute. Oh, I'm going to disappear. There we go. So we can see that where is there? So we can see that this is, where is it? Was it that one? Oops, I'm in the wrong screen, sorry. There we go, so many screens. There we go. So with that highlighted there, that is a class story link. So yeah, so this is from, there we go. We've got this TD with a class of title, and inside that there's an anchor to the link, and which contains the text that we actually want from the heading. So we can find the TD titles. If that's unique, then we can just pull all the titles out by finding by using a selector, which td.title. So yeah. But before we do that, so one of the things I was going to mention is, because we're scraping websites, then when we're developing if we're not careful, we could end up hitting the site lots of times, which, yeah, if it's at work, it's possibly not as bad an issue. You've probably got development environments you can hit. But if you're scraping a public website, then it's best to try and minimize the amount of hitting you're doing when you're testing out. Certainly when you're testing out whether you've got your scraping working correctly. It saves a lot of traffic, unnecessary traffic to that website. And if you do scrape and hit the website a lot, then I have seen websites put up notices to tell you not to scrape the website. So obviously, some people have done that without without respecting the website traffic. So what we can do, and a very simple way to actually cache it. I mean, we could just download the content using a command line tool, and pull down all the pages and just use the pages from the file space. That's one approach we can do. But then obviously when we want to update the website, when we get the latest version of the website, then we need to kind of pull that content down again. And so the other approach is to use we can use the def function, which has a nice kind of built-in kind of caching function in the fact that you can define something and then when you evaluate it, so you define something with def, and when the first time you evaluate it, it will calculate the value. But every subsequent time you evaluate that, it will use the existing value, so it caches the result of the first time you call the def. So if you put getting the website into a def, then it's only going to get that website once. Although you can then force it by updating the REPL, restacking the REPL, or even I think you should be able to update it by reevaluating the def as well. But that certainly does help to minimize the hits on the website. So if we look at that, so at the moment we've got things like WebAssembly and chemicals. So we've got quite a few things that were published in the last few hours. So the first 4, I probably don't have those from the evaluation I was doing last week. So let's see. So you could write a function that just pulls it. Here's a generic function that's just, we pass it a website URL and it will go off and get that website. That's not going to be cached. Every time we call this function, it's going to go off and hit the website. And obviously there's no caching there at all. So if we just called it, then every time it would go off and hit the website. And if there's a slow website, then obviously that's going to slow your development work down. But if we use a def, then and you can put a comment in like a doc string in defs as well. Then here we just put in here like a def for Hacker News, and this is the website content. So we go off this when we call this, we define this, and then when we call it the first time we call it, it's going to go off and hit the website. But then every time we call it afterwards, it's just going to use what's cached. So if I do that, so that should be in the REPL now. Switch to the REPL. Ooh. So this should be the content from yesterday when I was working on this, which is a little bit hard to show because it's a lot of content, but you can see the amount of content you've actually got to work with. But I think if I do, what was the WebAssembly? I think that was a new one. So if I do, so you can see WebAssembly is not actually in my list, so I didn't actually go off and hit that website. It's still using the content I grabbed when I first called this yesterday. So it is caching the website. So and everything is nice and fast, so I don't have to actually hit the website. Not that Hacker News is slow, but it's kind of instant because it doesn't need to go over the network to get this. It's all in memory. which is nice. There we do. Ooh, excellent collection. And also, if you're doing live demos, then that's also extremely handy, having something cached, because you never quite know what the network's like when you're doing a presentation. Okay, so we've got this. So we've got this website, Content Hacker News, we can use. But we've seen that there's a huge amount of content it gives if we just get the whole website. Even though we're converting it into a Clojure data structure, there's still a lot of things, a lot of tags in that, a lot of different keywords in that result. So we can narrow it down by if we just wanted to get the headlines, we've gone onto the Hacker News and said we needed to get title on a TD. So we've got we can define this selector saying, okay, we want to find all the tags which are TD, which are table data, and which have a CSS style of title. And then from within those, we want to get the tags are the anchor. So that's what we got from this Hacker News here. So we want the TD, which has class of title, and inside that we want to grab the anchor. So that's the content we actually want to pull back. We can just forget about everything else because we just want this particular title text. Get some music while we broadcast. So we can use this selectors. So Enlive is quite interesting because I think it was mainly designed originally as a templating system for generating dynamic content for websites, like server-side websites. So you create a HTML page as your template, which is very handy if you're working with graphic designers and sort of like people who aren't writing in your programming language. Most people can work with HTML and CSS doing the web front end side of things, whatever language experience they've got. But then you write Clojure code which goes over that HTML template and picks and finds the pieces of that template it wants to change by using these selectors. And so you can use the same technique for web scraping as well. And so there is this select function from Enlive. And so we're going to get our cached website as an argument. So it's going to pass in that huge Clojure data structure that we pulled in. And the second argument is the selector. So we have a vector that just defines the path to the content that we want. So the specific specific route to say, well, this is just the content that matches this this set of tags and CSS IDs. That's just what we want to return, and that still returns a lot of information. So we can just take one or two just as an example to see if we've got the right results. Let's do that in the editor here. So we do get an awful lot of content still with that, so it's still a little bit fiddly. There's an awful lot of stuff going on, but it's basically just the same content for each headline. So if we just get one of them, then you can see we've got tag with A, and so the A has got attributes of a href. So this is our anchor tag from HTML, which has a tag of href, which is the HTML reference, and it's got the CSS class, and most importantly, it's got the content, which is actually the heading that we actually want. Oops, let's make that a boop. There we go. So it's actually got the heading we actually want in there. So it's like kind of that. These are the kind of different sections we've got. So we got so we got tag, and we got content, and so we want to pull out the content of that for each of those. And yeah, and luckily enough, the Enlive has a specific function for doing that. So it has this text function which extracts the value from content. So we've got this content key, because this is just a map, and the whole results are just a list, a sequence of these maps. You have a map for each of the headings that we've pulled out. And then inside those maps, then we just want to get the content, and that's exactly what text does. So if we actually map this text function over this whole sequence of results, so this, so this whole sequence of all of the maps, then we map text over that, and it will just return us the string that we actually want. So we get the strings there. And again, I'm just using take to help us see that we've actually got the right results. Oops. Let's do it as a comment. There we go. And so you can see it's pulling out the title and the domain where it comes from. So those are the two things it's pulling out. Did I do that on the web page? Yeah. So I think on the Hacker News you can see. Can we see that there? Oh, it's a bit hard to see. Why isn't that scrolling over? TD. Oh, that's subtext. I will come to that in a minute. Yeah. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, there's another anchor there. Yeah. So you can see it's pulling out. So we're finding TD with a class of title, and then getting all the tags, the anchor tags, the A tags. And so there's one for the actual title, and then there's another one for the actual name of the domain it's coming from. So this is coming from googleblog.com. So it says googleblog.com is the domain. So that's the second A. So that's why we're getting two values here. So we get the title and the domain it's coming from. Because it's not just finding one thing and stopping, it's going to find everything that matches and puts them together. Hopefully that's clear. So we can put all this together inside a function. And so I just created a function here. Again, I'm just using the hard-coded the cache content for now, but then when I was going to do this in production, then I just have a call to the website content passing a website URL. That's why this function's got an argument, even though we're not actually using it when we're doing the cached function, because this is just a def and not a defn. So this function will go off and pull off all the headlines for us, and so there you go. Doesn't always do them in order, so it's, so the order they're actually displayed on the Hacker News website isn't necessarily the order you'll get them in your sequence. I haven't quite worked out what the ordering it uses is, but it just seems to be fairly random. There we go. Yeah, and again, I've just taken 10 there just to make sure I can see it's all working correctly. Then, yeah, so we can get them out using selectors, and there's a whole range of different selectors you can use. So like divs are obviously very common. if you just go off and select divs in any kind of fairly modern website, then that's not really going to help you because pretty much everything is in divs. It's just a divider, but usually dividers have some kind of CSS class or ID, which does make it easier. So you can use this div that has a class or an ID of sidebar, and that helps narrow down just getting the data from a particular section. Yeah, so just dot is for a CSS class, and then hash is for an ID. And then the more more tags you have combined, then the more likely is you can kind of narrow it down into something very specific. And the more specific the content you can get, then the better, because then you have to do less processing in Clojure. Although even if you do need to do stuff in Clojure, I mean, Clojure is really good at processing this data. It's all in a Clojure data structure, so it's not too big of an issue. It's just if you have a lot of string processing, that can get a bit fiddly as well. So hopefully, ideally, you'll just get specific pieces of data with tags. So you'll have like a key value pair, and the value you want is just in one of the values that's associated with the key, so you can just pull it straight out. And so back on the Hacker News, so there's also the Hacker News kind of thing. We could organize this in the same kind of list of that Hacker News uses. So it kind of puts new ones at the top for a while, and if they get enough votes, they'll stay at number 1. But as soon as they start losing votes, then so this has only got like 12 votes, so it's already kind of dropping down through the rankings. And so we could pull out that information and use that to organize our list of headings in the same way. But there's a slight problem with this because it's not there's no kind of unique key to that. So we can narrow it down. We can use TD. So there's a table data with a class of subtext, so that does narrow it down a bit. But then we've got these score IDs, and unfortunately the score IDs look like they're generated dynamically because they're all different numbers. So we're going to look at the scores here. Oops. Which is in here, I think. So this is all the kind of sidebar. Where is it? There it is. There it is. Oop, there we go. Yeah. So it's all in this TD class subtext, which is this whole little subtitle to the heading, and I'm going to put that back on. Oh, there I am again. I don't want to be there for now. But you can see that these scores, have got these unique numbers on them, because if you have a look at the next one down, oops, so they've all got different numbers, different IDs attached to them, which are all generated dynamically. So we can't use that ID directly because we don't really know what they are. There's no consistency on that. So we have to use a slightly different way to get the specific values here. But never fear, there is something in Enlive to help us do that. Did I cover that? I think I covered that in here as well. So we've got TD subtext, that's easy enough to find, but it's got all these different spans in there. But we could actually just use the Enlive, the first child, and this will get all the span content for us. So we'll get all the rest of this content, and then we can just pull out the bits we actually need. So it's still actually a fairly simple selector of just TD subtext, and then within that we want just the children, essentially. So that's what we did here. In the next exciting episode. So now we can select first child, and we're getting the score with the score ID, and it's the content of that is 148 points. So we've still got our span with the class of and it's got all the kind of the spans in there, and each of those spans has got a content key. So again, we can go off over all these and pull out all the content ones, and we can see we've got a content for the score, and for the like the duration, how long ago it was published. And so, because we don't have, so the other attributes there are kind of like the URL that it's for the tag, and so the other ones don't actually have content. So it's only the score and the how long ago it was published. So that means it's fairly easy. Oh yeah, here we go. So it's fairly easy to just again run the text over that, and so we can create a little function here that does that. So it just runs. Let's just pull that out for a second. Boop. So we can just add. So we've got our select with our selectors, and we can just pull out just the content versions of that, and we get just the points and how long ago the article was published. So that's a lot easier to work with, certainly a lot simpler than all that stuff. Yes. And again, all we're doing is just narrowing down, pulling out specific keys and just getting their values. So it's all fairly underneath the text function. It's a fairly easy kind of easily understandable process of what it's doing in Clojure, hopefully. So again, I've wrote a little function to do that. Again, we're using the caching version of that. In the production one, we'd pass the URL in there, and it's working as well. So we've got the headings and we've got the points, but they're not connected to each other. So we've kind of seen examples of how to do basic using basic selectors, but these are individual selectors. So at some point it would be nice to get both the headings and the selectors together. So we'll have a look at that in a moment. But for now, we can just use a simple function, and we're just using doseek for the sake of just printing these out. I could use a for if I wanted to actually use the data, but these are just strings, kind of like, I think just designed to be run as a command line and just print out the results. But if you wanted to use this as data, you just use like a for or some kind of iterator, and this is just going to this doseek is just going to generate nil, and all it's doing is just a way to iterate over each line and print the line out. That's all the doseek is really doing. And for each line, then we've got this map function, and all that's doing all that's doing is just going over the headings, going over the article scoring, and it's pulling out the first one from headings, and putting that as the start of the string, and so that would be the title of the heading, and then the number 2 would be the first value from article scoring, which would be the domain it's created from, and then it would do the same thing for the next pair from each collection, and so on and so on. So if we just evaluate this, and that's appearing in the REPL. Oops, did I press the wrong button? I did. There we go. So now we can see we've got so we've got the title, and we've got the hours, and where it came from, and how many points it's got. So that's what it's doing each time it's going through that. So it starts off by going through getting the title, So that's number 1 as %1, and the points that's %2, and then road track is %1, and the when it was posted is %2, and so on and so on and so on. So we get simple output there of data. Okay. But what we could also do is, oh, we did that already. Whoops. And we've combined the results. Yeah, again, it's just using this very simple anonymous function just to create a string out of a value from each of the collections. But rather than have them separately, we could actually just have one function. We could just have like headings and scorings, and we could actually just have a combination of selectors. And the way you do that in Enlive is you put them into a set. So hash with curly brackets is a Clojure set, and so obviously the selectors need to be unique, which makes sense. There's no point having duplicate selectors in there anyway, because you would just select the same thing twice, which would be quite confusing. So here we're selecting the headers, and here we're selecting the points and when it was posted. And so we get the results back together, except this time they're going to be all one data structure. So we can grab that, copy here. Oops, did I put this in here? Oh no, that's a different website I was playing with. There we go. Oh, there we go. Oh, except that's slightly different. Oh, yeah, that needs updating. So that is, what is my, oh yeah, website contents I can use. There we go. So this produces the same results as our two functions, but combined. So if we do headlines scoring, oh, I've broken it. Oh, how did I do that? Oh, where? Oh, I've already done that. Oh, no. Oh, sorry, it's a different one. Oopsie. Yeah, so it should be HH. I can use, there we go. There you go. So we get the same results, except they're all kind of in line with each other. So we're getting the heading and the domain, and then the points, and then when it was posted. All as one long sequence, and so we've got a sequence of 4 things that we were before we had a sequence of 2 things. So we could actually just update the our little kind of merging function. And so here we just using a bit of destructuring to do the merging, and we're also using partition as well. So we're going to partition up the results of this. So let's just take 8. Oops, there we go. So we've got the title, the domain, the points, and the hours. Whereas before we had title, domain, and then we had points and hours separately. So if we split them up into groups of 2, then we get kind of the collections that we had before, more or less. So that's what we're doing with partition 2 here. We're actually grabbing the Oh, that's scoring, isn't it? Oops. Scoring. So we're actually grabbing the content from headlines and scoring and partitioning that up into two parts. Which I think we can kind of see what we're doing there if we just pull that out. So yeah, so now we've got. Oops. Where's it again? Let's make there's a comment. There we go. So now we've got the title and domain as a sequence inside the sequence, and the same thing for the points and hours. And then we can take that, we can destructure that. So we've got hours, so we've got headings and scoring, and then we print the heading off, which will be the title, and then put the scoring, which will be the points in there, and then the next set will be the domain and the hours. So we've got the same kind of thing there as well. But again, we haven't really had to change much. We're just doing a bit of post-processing on the results that we're getting, just to combine them up and make them look nice. Okay. Well, hopefully that made sense. How are we doing for time? Oh, yes. We're not doing too bad. I did also have a little bit of an experiment with another website, Britannica.com, just to pull out what actually happened on this day. So it's the same kind of thing. I set up a web content page for this, which is cached. Actually, I did one for, this is a bit scrappy, so I haven't quite finished this off yet. I did this one for March 14th when I was doing this. So just pulling out the particular address for that page. So the website, it looks like, there we go. Boop. That one. So there's a main page, but then there's a specific page which just has all these boxes, all these pin boards as it's called, and so I can just pull out and just get a text only view of all this information and I can just pull out the names and who they are and when they were born, when they died. Is the event about when they were born or when they died? And this was fairly straightforward to do. Oops, there we go. So so I just grabbed the contents, put it into a def, and then just identify the div. So there's a div with a style which is born died type. So we get that, and it shows who was born, died. So either somebody died on the content, or somebody was born. So you've got died or born on. Or you can select the whole thing and just grab all the information, but that's a bit scrappy, and it's not quite as nice. You still need to be unpicked, some of that stuff. So it depends what we want to do. So I found out all the kind of details of, like the title was the person's name, I think. Yes, Walter Crane, Thomas Marshall, that sort of stuff. And then I can obviously use the text to just pull out the content and get the name of the person, which is what I was doing here. And then also getting the whether somebody was born or died. So actually combining selectors here. So we got Mustafa. So then if I just put over the HTML text over that, then I'll get the born on and died of that person. Oh, which I did here. There we go. So we've got born on Albert Einstein, so we probably want to put date in there as well. So born on, and put the date in there. Well, actually, no, because we're doing it from the single day, so we can just identify born. What I was going to do is just strip that down to just being born as a key, and then we could just reorganize the data. So we got all the people who are born and all the people that died on a particular day there as well. So that's just stuff I can do. I don't know if there's a way to do it in Enlive, but again, it's just a bit of simple Clojure. So I was just taking a Clojure approach of just splitting the string born on and making that into born, and then putting that as a keyword, and then I'd get I just created a little helper to do that, and wrote a little thing that just partitioned everything up, run the keyword over it, and then we get born, died, and born, died, and then we can make a map of who was born with a vector of all the people's names that were born, and the same for died, a vector of people that died. That still needs a bit of work, but I'll share that when I've tidied that up quite a lot, and there's probably a lot easier way to do it than that. There's a little I could probably do it into to make that a lot simpler. Actually, looks like a lot of code. Okay. Was there anything else I was going to cover? I think that's about it. Again, this is just a very simple intro to Enlive. I'll have a look at some of the other ones and see if there's what the other aspects of those other tools are that are useful, like Hickory and this Sparkle driver, which is also hooked into Selenium as well, so it's quite interesting. But yeah, if you're working with more than Java 8, then there's some issues there, but most people are still using Java 8 underneath Clojure anyway, so it should be okay. It's very easy to change. Okay, I'm going to leave it there and let you go early on the Sunday. And so let me know if this is interesting. I'll do some more. I think there's another kind of scraping stuff I want to do, but then we'll get back into using APIs as well, which obviously is far more preferable than using scraping, because you don't have to kind of do a lot of post-processing of all the content that you're getting. So the only thing you really have to do with an API sometimes is just convert it from JSON into a different format. So converting it from JSON into Clojure, which is really simple. There's quite a few really good libraries to do that, including like Clojure.data.json from the Clojure from Clojure itself. So that's very much easier than having to do all this. But if you've got no alternative, if you've got no API, then scraping is very easy to do. Finding out which bits you need to scrape are the tricky bits. And all the websites are different. Websites are very kind of messy, usually. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me, and so I'll leave it there. Again, if you need to get in touch with me, then reach out to me via Practicalli on the Clojure in Slack, and there's a sign up to get a free account if you don't already have one. And feel free, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, then please do. Again, thank you very much, and see you next time. Hopefully this will be Saturday. Hopefully it'll be warmer, and hopefully everybody will still be healthy. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.